Good job.
I am on. Hi,
Yay.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm so glad it gave me the option. I
Yes.
wasn't able to actually listen to all of the things that you were saying, but I did hear what you were saying earlier when we were trying to figure out the technical difficulties
Uh-huh.
about mom brain. And I'm so there. And I actually recently read an article about how the uterus is so important for memory function. And
Oh,
if
that's
your uterus has been on loan, which mine is, yours just was, I didn't realize that you recently had a baby. That's yeah. So mom brain, power to mom brain.
yeah. And I hopefully it goes away because I feel like there's sometimes where like right now there's also tired that gets sort of in there too, but that mom brain has been there since I had my first child. And you are pregnant with your fourth.
Yes.
You're amazing.
Ah, I don't know about that. It's work. So yeah, that's me. And happy birthday. Thank you so much for sharing this night with me.
I know when we were saying, for anyone who's watching, we were setting this up, and we're trying to figure out a good day between both of us being busy and doing whatever it is we do. And I was like, you know what, let's do it on the 16th. And I was like, it's my birthday, and you were like, really, you want to do that on your birthday? I was like, yeah, let's do it, because I figured right before I came on to do this interview, I jumped into one of my private groups and just gave them 30 minutes of like free information. I was like, you know what, it's my birthday, it's a great opportunity to give back. I
Totally.
lucky to be able to give back. So that's what I wanted to do, is to just share. So
Love it.
yeah, so I'm
Awesome.
on today, and already I see so many people that are excited to be on with us. So let's get started. I share a little bit about your background information, but tell us who you are. What's your background in all of this stuff?
And all of this stuff. So what I would say is in Stacyism, I swallowed the mirror, so to speak, and that I was raised by a woman who also swallowed the mirror of her father, who was the most extreme. There's labels get thrown around like confetti, but he was classic narcissist, like through and through, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse. She swallowed that mirror as the golden child. So in order to be the golden child to a narcissist, you must be a narcissist yourself, right? That's just the paradigm. And I'm not using the label to vilify anything. It's just a place in consciousness where people get stuck in. And I swallowed the mirror, but in a different way, because I became incredibly codependent based on being raised by somebody who she didn't give me an opportunity to plug into her, so to speak. Like I was always like, whoa, what's going on? And she never had anything to plug into. So when I really understood, first of all, epigenetics, which was huge for me to understand that we're not just passing along DNA, like DNA is being changed by the stories that we're writing. When I really understood that, not just on an intellectual, but a visceral level, something kind of shifted the code for me, so to speak. Like my own DNA just like transformed in that moment to go like, dude, you are Khaleesi, bitch. Like get on the planet, like hurry up, break that cycle. You can see it. Like I was always conscious enough to see it, but I didn't know that I was allowed to extend from it, if that makes sense. Like if I wasn't allowed to be myself, like the consciousness of being raised like that is just like you hide, you don't take up space, just whatever you do is going to have a consequence, and it's going to be negative either way. So there's no right way to go. You're kind of screwed. You're a mouse in a maze. So when I really understood that, and I understood that from my mom's inner child perspective, where she was coming from, I got to a place where actually when I was very young, my mom had bought me a journal and I wrote in it, and she ripped it out of my hands and she went and locked herself in the bathroom, and I liked the boy, and she was screaming that her daughter was a whore. So of course I didn't really ever write again because I never felt like I could. I never felt safe to do that. But when I was 23 and I already had 2 kids, I already touched cancer, I already had a college degree, I already left the father of my children, like I was a pretty seasoned 23-year-old. I literally locked myself in a bathroom for 3 days and bled my story. Like my writing was like, Stace, you're showing up to this piece of like writing more than you are your own children for these 3 days, because it's what you have to do. So I was like literally covered in like tissue snot for 3 days straight, nonstop, just pouring out the story. And I reread the story and I was like, this is shitty.
Yeah.
Like, this is a shitty life story.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that moment of really seeing, like, whoa, I kind of see what the pattern is now, because I was objectively looking down at it and going, ow, that's a story out there. It's no longer in me. I set out to change the story in me. And that's exactly what I did. So I got to this place actually with my family where as a writer, I was being called to write by my community. And as a writer, I said to my family, I had this like push where I knew I had to. It wasn't even coming from my ego. It was just like, okay, I literally wrote a new story in 2 weeks. Like, it took me a decade to actually create the story. But when I sat down to write it, I wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I wrote the story, something just kept saying it has to happen. Like, it has to go out. It has to move, because it's not really about you. Like, it literally was a story. I could kill. The story was dead in me. It was no longer mine. So I didn't have those hooks and ties. Like, what are people going to think? What's my family going to think? And I knew it wasn't about me. I knew it was bigger than that. So I had to ask my parents permission, and they had always said no. Like, when I was a kid, I used to threaten them, like, I'm going to write a book one day about this. And they said basically that they would disown me if I did that. And I got to a point where I was just like, there's one more thing for me to write about if that's what you have to do. But I have to stand in my truth. Like, you've never been allowed. And for the sake of my grandmother, who also dealt with never being allowed to stand in her truth, like, I will not be silenced by you. Mm-hmm. And I wrote my story, Imperfectly Sane. I wrote my book, and it actually healed a lineage. Like, it reverberated to this place that literally wasn't about me. Like, my mother has softened. It's ironic what happens in the transference of energy, because as she softens, I pick up on those things that I'm like, oh damn, I really do have to like shatter it from the inside out, because I'm kind of like getting the backlash of what she's letting go, if that makes sense. And that's what happens through our generations. And I just want to leave really good backlash for my grandchildren and great grandchildren. So I set out really to be the people on my journey who have seen me behind the, like, I was like the ultimate rebel, totally careless. Like, I was a bad kid. Like, if I had a teenager like me, it would have been a mess. But I was like me for a reason. And there were some people who saw me on the way, and I always wanted to be who they were for me to the world. So that's basically the gist of how I got into this whole lifestyle, I suppose.
And I just love, and you know, as I wrote my first book this year, and so like for me 2018 was like pretty cool. Like, you know, just I was like, wow, I turned 40, you know, my 40th year, and I wrote a book and had a second baby, and you know, all these cool things. And I completely empathize with what you say. It was not that I even wanted to write the book. I really it was like I had no choice. So I completely understand. And it's been the same thing. And I was kind of smiling as you were saying it with your mom, because I just spent time with my mom. They live in North Carolina. I live in New York. I just spent time with them. And the conversations ever since I wrote the book have been very different. And even the conversation that she had about a week before I went to go see her, and she said, why doesn't anyone want to see me? Why don't people love me? Why don't any of my daughters want a relationship with me? Because I love you, and I want to be in your lives. And I said, do you really want to know the answer? Because I'll tell you the answer. And so we actually have this really open, you know, raw conversation about what the issue was. It's not from 20 years ago. It's not from the story in the book. Because she said, you know, you said these things in the book, and blah, blah. And I said, but I'm not mad at you about those things anymore. That's from 20, 30 years ago. And I forgive you, and I can empathize with your hurt child that you were not able to let go of. So I can appreciate that. It's the stuff that you're dealing with now, the way you are now, that's still affecting us. So as much as it's hard to go through, you start breaking down those walls, and it's scary at times. And I'm sure
so scary. It's so intimate and weird. We're like, what are we doing? We've never done that.
Yeah.
It's very odd.
But it's really about, and just the last point you said about like changing the paradigm. I want my children, I know like you said, my grandmother, my mom, all these people, they did the best they could with what they had. And I appreciate that. I know that it was hard for me, but it was the best they could do. They loved me, and they came from a place that was the best they could do. I don't want to continue that pattern. So to be able to break it for the future is what's such a priority. That's what drives me to keep doing this all the time, knowing that it's possible to change and knowing that other people don't have to keep suffering that pattern.
Yeah, but here's the best benefit to it. It's literally changing the past along with the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like, that's my work where I can go, like, so I did a Kickstarter actually for my book. My mom still says she hasn't read it, but that's like so untrue. You cannot imagine the fall to my knees when I saw her name show up on that campaign.
Wow.
I waited my whole life for that moment. Like literally that was because I know I gave her a voice. Mm-hmm. And that's important to her. And I don't think she ever realized that I was actually being a voice for her. She just didn't like the way it was, like the way I was expressing it or whatever. So that's pretty powerful stuff right there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm so glad you were able to do that for her, because she had that trapped feeling. We know what that feels like, and I even feel like, and I don't know how old your mom is, but, probably, not far off in ages. And I think like that generation of women felt so disempowered to begin with. And then
Totally.
to top of it, their negative, family of origin, it just creates this catalyst for negativity that, unless someone decides to make that change and help them, they're stuck there. They think that's just the way it has to be.
Yeah. And then they don't know how too. That's a big thing, because it's hard work, because you have to face yourself. Jesus, that's just hard. To have to look in the mirror and be like, okay, that's actually me. That's actually my pattern. And that's like something that I don't, it's funny. I see it actually in my daughter, where like there's this truth where, if I would have been a codependent or a narcissist, either way, my mother's paradigm would have been in control, right? So she was in control. I either wanted her to love me, whatever it was, however I became that way. And I rebelled so much against her paradigm that I literally gave birth to a daughter who like cherishes her paradigm. And I'm like, damn it, the work is not in, rebelling against, being in opposition to. It is literally in the joining of the aspects of the self. And recognizing which parts of her are actually in charge of me, for sure, but what parts of me want to say, like, I'm actually going to dominate that part that you're in charge of currently, right?
And have a daughter, like, it's such a great opportunity to, to help, to have that female energy and be able to see that female energy and to help guide. I think is such an honor to be able to do that.
That's great.
That's awesome. I see some people asking questions. Chella, I was just saying before that I had just done another Facebook Live before. Chella was on that one, so she's saying hi again. And Lenora says, what does stand in your truth mean? So do you want to answer that question? What does stand in your truth?
Sure. To stand in your truth or my truth? I mean, to stand in somebody's truth, I think is actually... So for me, the way that I experienced the world was I was often projected onto, and as an empath, I would be like, oh, that's me. And even if I didn't think it was me, I would comply to that, reflection, projection inward, and I would hide in there instead of actually coming out to play. I thought that was my duty, and whatever projections came at me, I received them. And I believed them. And to stand in your truth, I think, is to actually wipe the mirror clean, so to speak. And to say, actually, I'm going to be an extension of myself I'm going to have an influence over this mirror in an extensive way, not a projective way, if that makes sense. So to be like Jesus, instead of to be, the way that we are raised in our society, and especially if you're raised by people who have narcissistic tendencies, it is isolating. There's nothing to connect to. So there's always this kind of disconnect, trying to connect, and all of your relationships will feel exactly like that until you can stand in your truth enough to, because you and I just talked about this, like with our mothers, it's all of a sudden uncomfortable when there's vulnerability and there's like more of a union of the yoke, so to speak. And standing in my truth specifically is to be centered in, okay, this is what I want to extend forth. It doesn't matter what's being projected onto me, because it really does have an effect. Like energy, it moves things.
Oh yeah.
But if I honor my source, which is really just honoring the inner animal instead of trying to override it constantly, if I just honor that, I will be in my truth. because it doesn't come really from me, so to speak. My truth or the truth doesn't really come from me. It comes from something that's I have to hear, I have to listen to, I have to follow. So it's just being willing for me to stand in that and to honor it.
Yeah, and
sometimes kneel, maybe.
yeah, and to like, I feel like you were saying too, like saying like to honor the lessons that you have, and to not try to push or force, to allow, because that's what I think I was just thinking, imagining a friend of mine that she used to say she was like a lizard that would go to different areas and just become the same as her surroundings. She could just camouflage and just become. Well, because she wasn't like, I feel like I used to be that way in a sense, where I would just go somewhere and try to fit in and not really want to stand out and want to just say yes or say whatever people wanted me to say and agree and whatever. Now I don't do that anymore. Now I say what I feel that I need to say. And like that, following your gut. My gut feels I need to say this right now. I'm just going to go and do it. I'm not going to question. There's a reason why I'm feeling like I need to say this, so I'm just going to say it. And since I've been doing that, it really changes, in my opinion. And, you know, I'd love to hear what you think about it. But
well, it's funny. I notice a lot. See, I think, again, we're coming from a generation that doesn't know boundaries. So a lot of times when somebody steps into that place of willfulness, of like, because we've had our wills taken from us, literally, like somebody else took our will. And we were taught that we were not allowed to have one. So if we're taught that we're not allowed to have a will, and all of a sudden we're like taking up space. What is the last thing that you just said, though?
About just like saying whatever people wanted to hear.
Oh, yes, that's it. So I see a lot of people defensively coming out and going, okay, well, now I have a will. I'm going to set boundaries for myself. And they're doing it again out of fear, which is the whole premise of like the way, obviously, you can deliver that with love, it sounds like. So I see a lot of people who, again, don't know how to make that connection, so to speak, and say something from a place of love instead of from a place of defensiveness. So I'm not, like, some people obviously can just naturally do that, but some people, when they start to first get into boundaries, they get really willful about it. And it's actually coming from a negative place, which is going to create wars instead of what we want, which is just to state our preferences, if that makes sense, which is just like, okay, here is my boundary, instead of like, you're crossing my boundary and I'm going to like attack you for it. I just see a lot of people doing that. I want to say something about that, because that's not the way to make things happen for yourself.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I think that's just because of the fact that I didn't know what a boundary was till I was 33.
I know.
Boundary?
I get it.
What is that?
I know.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey, you know, to just kind of see where it is, and you know, the reflection of like where I have been and the lessons that I have learned from that, and how much I appreciate those lessons, and to be able to say, you know, it was hard going through it at the time, but now I'm really happy that I went through it. There's no ill will, there's no anger, there's no frustration. None of that exists anymore. It's just a submission to the lessons and the appreciating the lessons and being able to move forward from it and not live from the past. And I think that for a lot of people that are, you know, even watching this, that's the hard part, is going through the pain in order to get to the other side, because they've been in pain for so long, they don't know that there doesn't have to be pain all the time.
Yeah. Well, the ironic thing is most people are living in pain to avoid the pain they're trying to avoid. And they're just living in it, not even realizing that that's true. That if they made a decision to stop the pain, which would look like having to change their life in some way, it would feel exactly like they're feeling now.
Yep.
Just with a different like script to do things with.
Exactly, except the end result is just way better.
Totally.
Well, so I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but I know that everybody wants to go to bed at some point. So,
I know, right?
I'm like, oh, I love this. It's like someone on the same page and completely we understand each other. And I love already some of the questions that are coming in. But so I know we came on saying, you know, some points that you'd like to leave the audience with. So what are some things that you think that just you're feeling like, you know, you'd like to share and leave people with that new knowledge to be able to help them in their future relationships and experience?
Okay. let's not, it would never be new knowledge, so to speak, because what I will say, everybody already knows in their gut. But it's a reminder, so to speak, because what I see a lot is specifically people, I don't know if you come from the position of being raised that way. I know that your work is because of a toxic relationship that you had, and mine is dealing with people who've been raised in a very specific way, and then they just think that that's normal, and then they choose somebody based on that normalcy, and then they feel obligated to stay. And that ultimately is a martyrdom excuse. And I want people to understand that, because one, I see so many people staying in relationships and they're worried about what's going to happen to them, because what's the person going to do if they leave? If you're that worried about what somebody's going to do to you if you don't be with them, you should not share your life with them.
Yeah.
Like every day investing in them, when you're afraid what they'll do behind your back if you leave them, that's a tragedy. That's terrible. So I see so many women staying in relationships with all of these excuses. And the piece that I wrote that I was going to share on here was called Don't Stay in a Relationship Because You're Afraid to Leave. And I see them making so many excuses, and they're all sacrificial excuses. And it's like, well, you know, I don't want to deal with other women. I don't want to deal with the finances. I don't want to deal with, you know, all of these things. And I'm just going to stay and deal with the kids. I'm going to sacrifice my happiness myself so I don't have to do that, or so I don't have to hurt this person. And really, you know, there's a million ways to get to that point. But at the end of the day, when you get to that point, you realize you're staying because you don't know how to leave. That's the only reason. And then all of those excuses can be broken down, and we can go, okay, I don't want to leave for my kids. But being a kid, and I know that you said that you were a child in this regard, who has been in a situation where we're like, dude, please just get a divorce. Like, that would be the best thing.
Yes.
We were in pain. Those children who you're afraid are going to be in pain, so you avoid leaving because you avoid having them have to feel pain or having to face your own pain. They're already in pain. So I use the metaphor in that piece about being a tree, which is like, if you are on fire and you're a tree, you have the opportunity, and you're not one of those trees that like needs fire in order to grow. You're going to die. But if you are a tree and you are uprooted, it feels like you're going to die. It feels terrible. But you get the opportunity to land in new soil if you are an uprooted tree. So either way, the pain feels like death. The pain of leaving, the pain of staying, right? One is just literally going to kill you in the end, and one might kill you in the end. And actually today, I heard a sermon, which I thought was really great. And his point was that basically source energy is more powerful than we are. And it's like the Mack truck driving, you know, in your lane, and you're next to a wall and it's about to come over, and you're in a little Kia, and you have basically one choice, right? You can try to hurry up and pass that truck, which you're probably going to get hurt severely, or you can yield to the truck. And he likened that to like the spirit, and I consider that the spirit in us. And so many of us are avoiding what is inevitable, what we know is killing us, because we're afraid of what's going to happen on the other side of that. And what we created in fear, because most of us got into these relationships in the first place based on our fear, based on having to be good enough, based on being comfortable with our own fear, whatever it is, will spiral out of fear for the rest of your life. Like, you're just going to be cleaning up mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. But what you start to create in love, which is what I'm not advocating for separation. I'm advocating for people, not just women, to begin being more intimate with their love than their fear. So that looks like somebody starting even today to be like, am I staying in this relationship because I fear leaving? Or am I staying in this relationship because I love being here? And if the answer isn't that I love being here, or that I love something, you'll never know love where you stand. and it will continue to spiral. So what I just want to remind people to do is we're so intimate with our fear. We're so intimate with it. We know it. We can tell what might happen, that we're devastated might happen. We're not as comfortable being intimate with our love. And I actually, in the article that I wrote, I saw this divorce ceremony. Did you ever see that? A divorce ceremony?
Yes. Yes.
I loved it because the point was, and that is true love. It's like love moves, it shifts. And those people, they left a relationship with each other, not because of each other. Mm-hmm. They had a divorce ceremony just like a wedding and walked down the aisle together and then separated. That is intentional, that's solid kind of foundational love right there. And if you don't trust that you have that, so you stay because you're afraid, that's a life in prison. Mm-hmm. So I just want people to boldly grab themselves by their own love and step up to that love, for whether that's like love of self, love of your children's future, or whatever you need to establish, like, okay, I love this. And if it's I love being in this relationship, by all means stay in it, but get yourself into a position where you can say I love this instead of I don't know if I love this, because that's torturous.
Yeah. So and it just, and like we said before, it just continues that cycle. So now your children are seeing it, they're also not seeing that love in relationships. They're seeing the fear, and that they're teaching them that that's normal. And yeah. We'll figure it out, but a lot of them won't. And a lot of them will just continue that cycle that we showed them if we don't break it ourselves.
Yeah. Not on my watch. Not on my watch. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, totally agree. So what else do you think? And that was beautiful. I mean, because I think that is so true. Is that, and I think to even another part of it is, I think that so many people feel that loving themselves, I don't want to say is wrong, but there's almost this thing of like, well, if I think too much of myself, then I'm a bad mom. I'm a bad person. And instead of saying, no, loving yourself is the priority, because you will not stay in something that doesn't serve you if you have love for yourself, because you'll say, hey, this really brings down my energy. I'm not living at my best. Why would I want to stay in this? But instead, and for myself, I was married. I was brought up religious. I was getting older, and I thought, well, I got married and I need to stay married because that's what you do. I am old now. And I got divorced. I was 34, so I wasn't that old, but it felt so old at the time. And so, like you said, all those excuses, all those things were just saying, like, I wasn't a priority. I didn't, and it was okay for me to be a priority.
Yeah. Or have preferences, or have anything, really.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Chella just said, getting accused of being selfish and self-absorbed. And I was definitely accused of that all the time. If I was trying to focus on me and my healing and my growth, it was me. That was me.
And we're I mean, my demographic is taught that they're not allowed to want. Mm-hmm. I literally have to reprogram people to become selfful. Mm-hmm. Because, and it's not like that whole selfish is so lacking. It's so scarcity oriented. When somebody looks at somebody and says you're selfish, it's like, no, dude, I'm actually self-full, and I'm so full that here's my space that I'm taking up. Mm-hmm. And you can like it or you cannot like it. But we were taught, that it's so common. You're, even to say you're so full of yourself, or like you're getting too big for your britches, or like, that whole, even the unwritten, unspoken family rules of like silencing, they play a role there. But yet, when you don't make yourself a priority, nobody else ever will. And that is the tragedy. That is my work with people, because God, don't we all want a savior? Like, wouldn't it be so great to just have somebody show up and take care of shit? Mm-hmm. And when I finally got that, and that's the premise of my whole life story up until this point, which is a dead story, old story, but the premise was I had to be that person for myself, and I had to be okay with it, because I was always the empath going, why do I have to be the solid one? Why do I have to be the one who's like constantly changing, constantly bettering myself when you just get to be a dick or whatever? I was always that. And then I was like, dude, nobody else is going to come do this. And it was from there, like that kind of learning to say myself, that actually created like a net for me where like now I actually think that I would have people to come and support me just because I was willing to do it for myself,
Yes.
which is a huge selfish step. But the self is the only thing that we got. It's the only thing that wants to come through, like our perspective, our character, so to speak, that we've chosen. Just like you were saying earlier about, you know, the lessons being really, you know, you loving them theoretically in the end. I think that we come in like a video game where we get to pick the character and we're like, okay, these are the advantages, these are the disadvantages. Can you hang? Can you rock that character? And there is a bit of sovereignty to that choice. And it's the honoring of that. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. These are my stories that I've chosen, the mountain I've chosen to climb so that I can lead people up the mountain or whatever that is. It's a pretty powerful perspective to be in communion with all of the other people who are also going through that, if that makes sense.
Oh, I agree. I mean, just like I feel like my children chose me for a specific reason. I chose my parents for a specific reason before I came. You know, it was I needed their lessons, whatever they were. And I think that when I started looking at it that way, I was able to let go more easily of the anger that I had before. Instead of saying, you did this, you didn't do that, you know, and living in victim mode. And I was able to say, thank you for teaching me, because I am a strong, independent woman because of those experiences. And I get to say, you know, I get to empathize a little bit more with people. I can understand where people are coming from. I can be more helpful and more understanding because I've seen what it's like to not be understood. I've seen what it's like not to have that support. I've been there. So yeah, those lessons are very much appreciated. And I'm thankful that I chose those people to be in my greatest teachers have been some of the most difficult lessons. You know, they were not fun to go through, but you know, I'm happy that I was able to get to the other side.
Yeah. It really is like childbirth. I witnessed a childbirth, and I mean, I've also been through it, but it's different to witness it. And it's really so interesting because it was the first time I didn't want to take away somebody's pain, because I understood that at the end of that, she was getting something that is untouchable to anybody but her and her baby. And that was a really important lesson for me, because I've always been like, I want to take away people's pain. And I got to just witness her in it and be like, damn, bitch, you are strong. Like, you got it. Okay. And you're going to get something at the end of it that if I took that pain away from you, you wouldn't have gained.
Yeah. And that's important to remember as a parent. You know, like you see your child struggling, and it's important to give them support, but it's important not to take away. There needs to be some kind of struggle, because they learn from that. And, you know, within structure, but there needs to be that. And, you know, there definitely is that need for, as a parent and a lot of women and myself, there's those moments where I want to just fix it. Like, oh, it's just a puzzle piece. I can just fix this. But no, they need to figure it out, the puzzle, so that way they can do it the next time. And it's, you know, it's the allowing them to figure it out without falling too far down, but allowing them to figure it out that gives them the power and the strength.
Yeah, and when they get older too, it's great because then you get to vicariously, like, I never resonated with anger. So now when my daughter comes home and she tells me things that I'm like really not a fan of, I get really pissed for her because she won't do it for herself. She's just like I was, who's like, oh, it's okay, you know? And I'm like, no, dude, these girls need to stop. And I get so like in my space. Yeah, but it's great for me because it's also me just rekindling that part of myself that wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
You know, if I was angry, I was doing it just to prove that I didn't care. Like, I never really vibrated at the frequency of like fiery. I was just like, if that makes sense. Oh, yeah. So it's cool to see her grow up and then to be like, wow, you're actually really healing me through your own struggle, for me having to witness you and not take over for you. It's healing me somehow.
Oh, that's awesome. How old are your kids? Your older kid?
Oh my gosh, my son's going to be 15 in a few days. My daughter's going to be 13 in a few days. And my other daughter is 3.
Aw. That's,
yeah.
I think you have built-in babysitters. Lucky you.
Oh, they're great too. They're really good kids. I don't actually let them like watch her that long, but they are really good, and I do trust them a lot. So I got super lucky.
Well, I'm sure it has a little bit with you as well, but yes, it's definitely that combination, I think, of both personality and, how we are at supporting their needs.
Yeah, I definitely let them teach me.
Hmm.
So
That's awesome. Well, so
yeah.
we have a little bit of time. Is there any other points or tips you'd like to share? I mean, there's great information. For those of you who are just tuning in, you're going to want to watch this because lots of really good stuff in here.
I don't think so. Am I supposed to have an answer? I don't think so. I don't know.
No? Well, if anybody has any questions, now would be a good time to ask them. Because there's a little bit of a lag, so there might be a few seconds where people are still writing or whatever. But where can people find you? How can they follow you? What people, I'm sure, are going to watch this and be like, wow, that chick is awesome. I want to be able to see her more. So how can they do that?
Awesome. I have tons of free content on YouTube. I'm actually, I don't know if I shared this with you, but it's so funny to me. It's so fun to think about in the playground of life at this point. But um, one day I was like, what am I really? Like, what do I really do? Because I do a lot of like shamanic work. I do a lot of psychotherapy, but psychotherapy is futile because it's usually from the ego. So I'm doing a lot of coaching. Like, there's a lot of things that I do, and how can I encompass all of that into one thing? And I went for a walk and I was like, what am I really? And I got this like hit, like, you are an empoweress. And nobody trademarked it. So I trademarked the word empoweress. I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun in the Matrix. I'm Empoweress on YouTube.
Okay.
And Imperfectly Sane can be found on Amazon, which
Nice.
is fun. There's that. I'm on Facebook, obviously, because we're on Facebook, and my website is www.stacyhoch.com, which is stacyhoch.com. I send out newsletters and whatnot, but you know what it's like, girlfriend. I'm a mom. At this chapter, I honor my chapters. I honor my seasons. I think that's a really important part of life, and this chapter is definitely dedicated to like momming. So I get out when I can, but I mom mostly.
Yeah. Well, that's the priority, right?
Yeah.
And we do this, it's the why. Part of it is, to be there for our children, so we want to be able to spend time with our kids. Or why are we doing all of
Yeah. Yeah, I have a big thing about like I want to be the one raising my kids. Like that's very, very important to me. So
Yeah, I totally agree.
yeah.
Well, so if anyone didn't catch that, we'll also put it in the comments, so that way you can just click the link and be able to follow Stacey. Kim said your videos have helped me through this difficult year. That's awesome.
I love it. Hi, Kim. That's great.
Awesome. And just so grateful for being here. So, I think that, and I was actually saying this in the other video that I did earlier, the universe gives us opportunities, and it's up to us to decide to take them. And I think, the possibility of this interview being watched live has been available, about 2 weeks ago is when I shared it with everybody. And, so people knew about it. And the people that showed up, that was the universe gave the opportunity, and then people showed up, and they came to witness. And I think it's great, because the more we come with our full selves, and we're eager and ready to learn, and to hear other people's perspectives and all that, the more we're ready to do that learning and growing, the universe will give us more positive things to help us on our journey. But if we keep saying, no, what, universe? I'm not really ready yet. I don't think I'm going to do that. Then the universe is like, all right, cool. Well, then we're going to do this other thing then. And it's like, we're actually making it more difficult for ourselves. So just, universe provides, just take it.
Yeah, you are actually that for me today too. Excuse me, it's my first Facebook Live. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, and we figured it out. For anyone, we were trying to figure out the smoothing out the details before we came on. So we were both, trying to figure it out, and we did, luckily. So it worked out perfectly.
Yeah, I'm grateful.
Yeah, me too. So if there's no other questions for anybody, again, if you watch this recorded, then please go back and ask any questions. We will be going back and reading any of the comments. If we didn't respond to one of your questions during the live, we will go back and respond to them. So, don't feel bad if sometimes we don't see the questions right away. So we will be answering the questions. And again, if it's recorded, you're watching this recorded, we will go back. So don't feel like you missed out completely. You just didn't get to have it answered live, but we'll go back and answer it. So don't worry, you didn't totally miss out. So if there's nothing else, then I will say thank you to everybody who came on and all
Thanks, guys.
shared my birthday with me.
Yeah, happy birthday. That's so fun.
Thank you. And anyone who's following my page, Being Loved Shouldn't Hurt, or my private healing group, Codependency and Healing support group, I will be doing this again. I think Tuesday. I actually have someone else coming on, and then probably the next Tuesday as well. So we will be seeing you again very soon. And again, share this video with whomever you think might resonate with this video, and ask us questions. I mean, here you have two people that have different, slightly different experiences, but we're here to help you. I mean, that's what I know, that for me, helping you live your best life makes me happy. Like that's part of has become part of what my life purpose is. And I know, Stacey, just from the things that you said, I can tell that you're on the same page. It's the calling, right? It's that pulling feeling of like, I don't even know if I thought I was going to do, if you would have told me 5 years ago, this is what I would have been doing, I'd have been like, really? Because I'm really messed up right now, so I can't help people. So the fact that, actually maybe it's longer than 5 years now, which is amazing, but the way the life has gone, and to be able to be pulled in this direction of being of service to others is just, I am so grateful for that. And so we are here to give service to you. So take an opportunity, ask us questions, and we will be seeing you again very soon. So have a great night.
Yay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks so much.